The next item is item number 15, application for certificate of appropriateness for 170 Central Park West, the New York Historical Society, an individual landmark within the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District and also within the Central Park West, West 76th Street Historic District, a Roman eclectic style museum and library designed by York and Sawyer and built in 1903 to 1908. With wings added in 1937 to 1938 by Walker and Gillette. This is an application to install signage.
Commissioners, Lisa Schaefer, Preservation Staff. The application for the New York Historical Society is to install this temporary banner, which will be in place for this exhibit from September through May, and the applicants will explain the installation in more detail.
Good afternoon. My name is Andy Von Pastor. I'm the Vice President of Operations at the New York Historical Society. I have Laura Washington, Vice President of Communications, and Scott Denell from Flatfire Development, or TBDW, as our consulting architect. Just going to bring Laura up for a minute and tell you a little bit about the exhibition, just to give you the background. Please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having us. On September 26th, we're opening a groundbreaking exhibition called Chinese American Exclusion Inclusion. And the exhibition looks at the centuries-long history between Chinese and Americans. We're looking at immigration, we're looking at trade, we're looking at labor, we're looking at the fact that, you know, the tea that was dumped during the Boston Tea Party was tea that was made in China. So it's been a complex and long-term relationship. And this exhibition looks at the history, the story of Chinese Americans as integral to American history. This person on the banners, Anna May Wong, she is a second generation, she was a second generation Chinese American. Her grandfather immigrated from China to the United States in the 1800s. She's also the first Chinese American movie star. And the photo that we're using is from her identity card. Chinese Americans had to carry identity cards in the United States because of the Exclusion Act and from the 1882. And we're looking at how the Exclusion Act, among other things, influenced American immigration policy. And those are things that we're still, you know, dealing with and grappling with in the country today. The exhibition closes on April 19th, and we have a lot of programming related to it. We have a speaker series, and we hope that you will come out and see it.
Thank you.
So this is the front of our building as it is today. In 2011, we completed a renovation where we restored the facade, we changed the entryways, we added the two new doorways where the windows were, and that's been approved by the commission, and that's the finished product. That's the 77th Street side of the building. Again, there we completed that a little bit 2 years earlier. There's a new handicap ramp and the new signage and entrance to the Historical Society. Just a corner view of the facade. This is just a previous sign that we did years back. This was an entire cover of the front of the building. This really set the pace for the Historical Society kind of coming back to life. This exhibition, it was a little before my time, but the momentum started with this exhibition. This was Lincoln in New York, which was done in 2010, and a similar installation. This was approved actually during the construction process. The construction company actually submitted this to us, and it was approved, and we put it up during the run of Lincoln. This is the drawings that were submitted then. This is the new signage. We've contracted with a different erector, Manhattan Signage Company. New engineers on their staff went through and designed the drawing. It calls for 6 main points of installation on the corners and on the center, and then small eye hooks on the columns. Turnbuckle system to keep the banner pulled tight. There's grommets that hold the banner onto the cabling. These are the installation details at the column. It's a small eye hook where the cable will run through. These are the 6 points on the facade where you have a metal bracket bolted into the joints. So there'll be a steel bolt cut into the joints and turned in.
Did you have a structural engineer look at that? Their columns are okay, having that kind of weird load put on them?
Yeah, we actually did it earlier with Stillman years ago, but they also had their engineer come out and look at it. And the banner is, I want to say it's about a 60% fill of the material so that the wind will pass through it. It's been a big issue as we've done this a couple times now. So this is just the angle, the corner detail where the 2 turnbuckles mounted. And there's 3 points of attachment to this.
Have you ever thought of, I don't know if the word master plan is right, but somewhere that you get an approval from us so that you don't have to keep coming back?
It was brought up a lot in the last couple of weeks, yes. And what we do is, it wasn't time to go back and take a look at this with the architects and Stillman to come up with a master plan.
Right.
Do that, but we will come back, I guess,
Okay, you may
in
want to-
January and say this is our, our details we want to put up and keep up and be able to remove and replace, yes.
Right.
The staff has encouraged me to come back quickly as possible with that.
Right. My understanding is that I think these are considered temporary and we allow them for, I think, 60 days and it can be done at staff level. If it's greater than that, then it has to come before the commission. And since you've shown us some examples, presumably that this commission has approved before the other 2, I was just thinking that, that you have to keep coming back to us when there are changes to exhibitions. I mean, I'll be honest, I think some of the other ones are more difficult to support because they're entirely obscure any of the features. Something like this, which at least sort of sits in place, is something that the commission could consider. But I understand that you want to move ahead. Your exhibition is opening soon, right? Okay. We'll take that into consideration if
Absolutely
you
will.
want to do
It'll
that.
make it easier for us too. Yeah.
Right.
We've had other ones where we put them on scaffolding when we're doing the restoration. That was a little bit easier. That was just part of it.
Okay, got it.
Scaffolding,
Right,
Yeah.
understood. All right, any questions for the
I
other?
just have a
Yes,
quick
Ivy.
question. Was there a different kind of hardware that was previously installed for the other banners and that had to be,
We took
Take
it
it,
out
and then
restored
what?
it. That was part of when the
so
contract
you
was
restored the stone? What did you do
completed.
with the whole,
joints. So
into
part
the
of-
joints always?
Right, so part of it was when we did the restoration, we cut the joints and did the replumbing, so it was done as part of that. And then we back up and
Right.
fixed it too.
This
Yes,
may be
Michael?
kind of more to the question of the long-term view, but this exhibit ends when?
In the end of April.
And the next exhibit starts when?
We have a big history exhibition every year.
So it's
And
like, you would expect something like this to be like a once-a-year kind of thing?
Not always, because it's expensive. And you look at the cost of it. I mean, this is a sizable expense, and we weigh it out. If we think the exhibition is going to warrant that or draw the attention, yes.
So at most, it's like once a year for a number of months?
Which would be 2 years, yeah.
All
But
right.
usually comes to September through fall through spring.
Thank you.
Are there other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. Well, we may have other questions. We'll take testimony. Max Yeston?
Max Yeston, Landmark West. According to the New York City Department of Buildings, what is proposed is not a temporary banner, but a flex sign structure. Calling it a temporary banner does not change the fact that it is an illegal sign in a residential district. I will elaborate on this point later in my statement. For the record, Norman Weiss, professor of historic preservation at Columbia University, who is recognized for his activity in the field of masonry cleaning and repair, was helpful in reviewing the technical details of the current proposal. If the sign is installed, the metal should be A304 stainless steel. For the aluminum spacers, there should be a neoprene pad or other isolator to prevent the spacer from cutting into the granite. The spacer bar's central anchor will carry the most compression against the flutes. The concern is any damage to the finely carved stone. While granite can tolerate a harder mortar, the epoxy resins injected within the grout could stain the surface. How will the granite adjacent to the injection site be protected? Since the 125-foot-long sign will be affixed in just 16 places, the tension wire will need to be quite heavy to prevent sagging. Is the applicant sure no other anchorages are required? According to the plans that were sent to us, no wind vents have been provided in the 3,000 square foot design. Is there concern that wind drafts against the fabric could dislodge the anchors? Once the wire and sign are in place, the turnbuckles will assumedly be tightened to stretch the sign as flat as possible. What provisions have been taken to assure the torque is calibrated without over-tightening that might dislodge the anchors? As to the fill material to patch the holes, if the anchor bolt's diameter is larger than the existing joint, the stone will be cut away. Over repeated installations, the granite will lose its current crisp edges. This poses maintenance, weathering, and longevity concerns for the stone. Instead of repeatedly drilling into stone joints, it would be preferable to have permanent stainless steel sockets installed on a flat surface. These could receive threaded eye bolts when desired and could be filled with threaded plugs when there is no sign. Instead of obscuring the facade's most prominent architectural features, as we believe this one does, the sign could be mounted in the stone panel above the columns and tied back to the panels below the windows. A concern just as significant is the proposed sign's legality. A sign this large would be illegal on the Historical Society because it is zoned residential, i.e. located within an R10A district. According to Section 22-30 of the New York City Zoning Code, the only instance when large signage is permitted in residential zones is when it is used for, quote, lots containing certain community facilities, unquote. The only kind of signs permitted on these facilities are, quote, flags, banners, or pennants other than those that are advertising signs, unquote. Once again, calling it temporary doesn't change the fact that it is an illegal sign in a residential district.
Thank you.
Commissioners, we have reached out to DOB to confirm the legality of the sign.
Right, and it seems like it's a somewhat complicated issue. It's about how the Buildings Department interprets temporary signs. And I just want to clarify, there's a policy that we do ask the Buildings Department, or we ask applicants to go to the Buildings Department to see if what's before the commission requires any zoning changes that would require them to go either to City Planning Commission or to the BSA. However, there's no legal requirement for them to do that. It's just a matter of policy, and we think it's a good policy. So we have reached out to DOB on this. And even if we support this application, if it doesn't comply with the zoning, then they will not be able to install it at the Buildings Department. So that goes without saying that we cannot override the zoning code. This agency doesn't override the zoning code. Okay. All right. Barbara Zay?
Barbara Zay of the Historic Districts Council. While our committee does not take issue with the design of the proposed sign, HDC generally laments the continuous use of signage labeled temporary on New York City's most treasured landmarks. These large format posters have the effect of turning an architectural treasure, such as the New York Historical Society, described in the building's designation report as, quote, austerely classical in feeling and displaying great dignity in its composition, end quote, into a glorified billboard covering the fine architectural details, proportions, and symmetry that earned the building's designation as an individual landmark. Thank you.
Thank you. Christabel Guff?
Christabel Goff for the Society for the Architecture of the City. We were sort of surprised to see this signage being used again and again. In 1999, there was a rash of colossal vinyl advertising signs let down over Manhattan buildings, both the landmarked and the unprotected. At that time, we brought out a publication, The Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. It appears she is back, at least her head. We would like to remind the commissioners that there was a wise decision at that time not to allow this type of signage commercially when Jennifer Robb was chairman Rather, the commission favored the more traditional painted wall signs whose size, color, and placement is regulated. Other museums find it possible to advertise exhibitions with decorative banners of a reasonable size, but this proposal obscures the landmark and defiles the historic district. When the Historical Society was built, New York's nonprofit institutions had some dignity, and that is reflected in the landmark's design, as the designation report notes. We agree with our colleagues that turning a landmark into a billboard is a very decadent concept. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers? Community Board 7 has approves the proposed temporary installation of the banner on the upper facade of Central Park West face. So they support the project. Would you like to respond to anything that was said right now?
We understand their issues. I didn't realize they were going to respond. Come back with the master plan.
So, oh, no, you go.
Just, right, and if they'll come back with the master plan, I think there's, the commission will at that time just think about what's the appropriate size, what's the appropriate location, and also what's the appropriate method to secure these banners or these signs in the future. Yes, Roberta?
I think that, I agree with that. But I was just thinking that, I know we have very elaborate, but I think good rules and regulations for signs that are painted on walls, and those are temporary, right? Those are also temporary.
The ones that are painted on walls?
Yes, they're permanent, so that's maybe why we do them. Huh? Okay, so I was thinking that perhaps we needed some regulations that.
In our rule.
Because so we approved this huge sign.
Right.
The Alexander Hamilton sign.
Well, Commissioner, so the Alexander Hamilton sign was approved at the staff level at the time because it was viewed, because of the construction, other things, more like an installation of art, which allows it to be up to more than 60 days. The second application that they showed that was approved by the commission was improperly approved by the commission based on that previous approval, which is why this one has come before you, so that because these are up for more than 2 months, and so since this is something that the Historical Society wants to continue doing, that we felt that the commission has to look at this and decide this as a general matter of appropriateness, as opposed to any kind of installation or an art installation or a temporary installation.
And what's the length of time for this one?
Till April, I believe.
It's less than a year and over 2 months. So that's why it's coming.
From
7 months.
6 months.
And the other question, though, is even more concerned about how it's installed.
Yeah.
Know a bit more about, we're not structural engineers here, but just to understand what the options are for how to put up this kind of stressed fabric signage. What are our choices?
Right.
We don't want to damage the columns.
Right. Right, we don't, but I think in this case, we've clarified how they're planning to do it, right? Because it's not going into the stone. And otherwise,
We're going to penetrate the joints with an anchor and hold them that way. Any kind of work we've done in the past on the historic faces, attachments, we put them in with an anchor on the joints, and then done the repair, cleaned it and repointed it,
So basically the same system you used, you're going to use this time. And was there any damage to the stone at all as a result of those previous efforts?
None that was reported. I can't tell you that I looked at every anchor, but from what I saw, no, and we had, a full restoration by that.
But
And we would repair anything we did when we took this out.
But how do you actually repair it? What's the material of the column?
No, it wasn't,
it's in the joints.
Okay.
So it's in the cement.
And put the mortar back in to match. We already had that from the restoration, and we just repointed.
Yes, Diana.
These are different joints, though.
Diana, and then Addie. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was just going to say for the master plan discussion, I'd like to have them also show some other examples of, say, the Metropolitan and other museums that are using banners, I mean, I feel like, that, so, are there perhaps more vertical banners that might
Right.
create less interruption of the facade and
I
still have
agree.
a very large impact? I think that having big banners is actually fine, and I'm okay
Right.
with it, but
Right, I think
that-
that, and I would just like to say, whatever approval over here doesn't prejudice us one way or the other in terms of a master plan when it's an ongoing change. And I think we'd probably look at that maybe differently. But I think since it seems that the institution may, in the future, have these exhibitions time and time again, it's worthwhile for you to look at that, because then you can also address issues of installation, which has been raised over the long-term wear and tear of material for signs on facades that are protected.
I think we'll go back as an institution and listen to what was said by the community and take a look at it and say, how often do we need this? Do we need to do this?
Right.
If we do, come back to you very quick and, say after the first of the year and say, this is, maybe downsize it a little bit or change the details.
Yeah, Adi, you had a question too, right? Okay. Are there any other questions? Yes.
No, not just, are we commenting or just a question?
Oh, okay. If there are no other questions, we can close the hearing then.
So moved.
Okay. Michael.
I think that for me, the institution is such an important one for New York, and it's so important that it's kind of gaining its sea legs and becoming stable. I think it's a valid thing to consider this as a series, as hopefully the last of a series of temporary installations as being, for me, I'd give it a little bit more leeway, but I think that that this should be the last temporary one, and that there should be a master plan for temporary signage or semi-permanent signage on this building, just like there is for the Natural History Museum, 2 doors up. And I remember that a few months ago when they appeared here for some various work related to the Roosevelt entrance, signage and banners were incorporated into that, as were they, I think, for the Met, which we also recently looked at. I think there were some signage things for that, but I know certainly for natural history. And I think that the principle for those was really allowing the architectural elements to be foregrounded and not to be hiding or obscuring principal architectural elements. And this certainly does. So
Right.
I think that for me, I'd vote to approve this one as a temporary, but for something that's going to be up potentially 50% of the time, I think we have to have a more architecturally integrative approach.
I agree.
Further, I think that the applicant should engage with the good government group that spoke in unusually detailed technical terms about this, and I think that those technical questions should be addressed in concert with their engineers.
Are there any other comments or concerns, or can we take this to vote? Any issues? I think we all recognize that this is temporary, that we encourage you to really look at this in the long term, and I think the commission at that time will be able to take, I think, a sort of a deeper look into what would be appropriate in the long run. So this is, you have your exhibition coming up, we understand. I would say that this is appropriate only in the context that it's temporary. All right. So, Adi, would you like to read it? Thank you.
In the matter of certificate of appropriateness, Manhattan 170 Central Park West, New York Historical Society individual landmark, the Upper West Side, Central Park, West Historic District, Central Park West, West 76th Street Historic District, Block 1129, Lot 29. The application is to install signage zoned R10A, R8B. Recommendation is approval that the proposed installation is temporary and will be in place for less than a year, that the installation of the banner will not cause damage to significant architectural features of the building. That the anchors to which the banner will be attached will be installed into mortar joints and thus will not cause damage to the masonry columns. And do we recommend the next piece? Or no? No, okay.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? The application has been approved.